How's it going, YouTube? This is Skul, and in this video, I am going to talk about the top 5 gaming things that I do not own, but I want to own someday. I have a lot of stuff in my collection. The last time I made a game room tour was all the way back in 2022, and I've only added stuff to that ever since then. A lot of it is currently in storage. Those boxes behind me have gotten a little smaller, but they're still chock full of stuff. I've tried my best to display as much as I can in this space that I have, but the sad reality is that I can't, and that's part of the reason why these 5 things I still don't have even now, even though a lot of them I've wanted for years at this point, is because either I don't have a place to put them, or it's really hard to justify getting them when I know that I won't be able to properly appreciate them like I would if I had a bigger space like a house of my own. Regardless of the reason, I don't have these items yet, so I'm going to go ahead and tell them to you, and I welcome your comments below letting me know what stuff you do not own but you really want to own someday. It could be anything gaming related. It can be a video game, a console, an accessory, a toy, like a poster, anything. Anything that has to do with video games. What do you want? What do you want the most? Be sure to let me know. And also consider subscribing as well, because that's what YouTube wants me to say. Starting at number 5, r.o.b the robot. And ironically, even though this is possibly the most well-known video game accessory of all time, I didn't know it existed until I watched the Angry Video Game Nerd episode on it when that first released. Actually, I think it was like a year or two after it released that I first saw it. I grew up in the 90s. I was born in 92. Of course, the NES launched in the mid-80s, so I missed out on the NES when that launched. Most of my experiences with the NES growing up were just the console, and viewing it as more of an older toy as compared to the Nintendo 64 and PlayStation and stuff that was relevant at the time. But when the NES came out, r.o.b the robot was a major selling point for it, especially here in the United States. There were a lot of kids who got the system because they wanted a robot buddy to play video games with them. And that's part of what made the NES such a hit, was because of r.o.b the robot. It feels like r.o.b is a must-own for any serious retro video game fan. And I really do want one someday, but it's just not a priority, not to mention these days it's very expensive. Unfortunately, most people who own r.o.b these days, in fact, I'm going to dare say all people who own r.o.b these days, never actually play with r.o.b. They display it as part of their game room, as part of their store, a display piece. That's all that r.o.b has turned into. And that's why I want it too, as a display piece. So as much as I want to own one someday because of the historical value of it, I have no sentimental attachment to it. I don't think I've even seen one in person. And that's why it's so low here on the list. Still something I want though. Coming in at number 4 is the Virtual Boy. This is the one Nintendo system that I do not own a version of. As of now, I am still missing, let's see, a Game Boy Light, a Game Boy Micro, a DSi, a DSi XL, a launch model 3DS, and a new 3DS non-XL. Those are the only variants of Nintendo systems that I don't own, that I do own another version of from those families. The Virtual Boy is the one and only console that I do not own in any way, shape, or form, that I cannot play games from unless I play on my hacked 3DS. I actually have played... I just bumped my microphone. I actually have played the Virtual Boy on a few occasions, and every time I do, I found that it's actually a whole lot of fun. It actually does hurt my eyes after looking at it for a little while, but the games are pretty good. Not terrific, but they're a whole lot more fun than you would expect for if you've never played them. And even though it hurts my eyes to look at the Virtual Boy screen, the number one reason I really want one these days is because video mods exist to send the video signal away from the Virtual Boy and straight onto your big screen TV. And you can even do things like change the color palettes. So red might look a little too harsh on your eyes, but you can change it to a nice blue or green or even just black and white. And that's just really cool. I think that modifying video game systems to do things that they were never capable of when they were first released, that's something that really fascinates me. And that makes it a really easy and fun way of playing the Virtual Boy. The biggest problem with them, of course, is that they have turned very, very expensive, in part because of those mods that help to make them a lot more playable. But also, the Virtual Boy has a really active homebrew scene. There are more games that have been made for it by fans in the years since it was discontinued than were made for it officially when it was originally relevant. And even the broken ones, you could still fix up or modify in some way to make them usable. Combine that with the fact that there weren't that many that sold in the first place. Let me look this up real quick so I don't misquote. There were only about 770,000 units that were sold, less than 1 million. Yeah, so there's not that many to go around. It's just made it very, very expensive. I would love it if for no other reason. It's the one and only Nintendo system I'm missing, but I need the money first. Number 3 is the Dreamcast. Yeah, surprisingly, I don't have a Dreamcast yet. I own most home video game systems that were released from the 3rd generation on, and some before that. But the Dreamcast is probably the biggest system that I'm still missing. I'm missing a few others. I'm missing the 3DO that I want someday. I'm missing the ColecoVision that I really want someday. I'm missing quite a few systems, but it feels like the Dreamcast is the highest profile video game system that I'm currently missing. I own plenty of Dreamcast games, but I just haven't picked up the system yet for a few reasons. This is going to sound a bit silly, but I like upscaling my video game systems. I could always just play on my CRT back there if I really didn't care about video quality, but I do. And I've either RGB modded or gotten cables to output RGB video from all of my systems that I can. And the Dreamcast isn't so easy to modify. The video signal on it is a little out of whack. It means that if you want the best signal out of it, you need to get a cable that has a toggle switch on it to get the best picture depending on the game. It feels like a lot of extra work, and I've had a lot of people over the years tell me, oh, it's not that complicated. The fact that you need a switch for the game, I don't like that. I like just plugging it in and forgetting about it. I've been waiting since about 2018 for My Life in Gaming to make a video about getting the best video from your Dreamcast, but they've been waiting on the release of a cable that doesn't include a switch. And that cable has been delayed over and over and over again to the point where it probably isn't going to happen. I also want to get an ODE for it. That's not really an issue though, because plenty of those exist and they're pretty cheap these days. I just keep finding excuses, I guess. I keep being like, oh, I'll wait until a better cable comes out. I'll wait until the ODEs get cheaper. I'll wait. No. I'm done waiting. I need to just bite the bullet and get it. The Dreamcast turns 25 this year, for crying out loud. I have no reason to still be missing it for my collection. I'm going to Japan next year for a trip, and I'll tell you guys what, I'll be on the lookout for one of them while I'm there. With any luck, when I get back, I will have a brand spanking new 25-year-old video game system of my own that can play Dreamcast games. Number 2 on my list, the Pokemon trading card game video game, which I actually already own, but I want to own it complete in box. This cartridge right here, this one I'm holding in my hand, was the very first video game I ever bought. I've told the story before, but I got this for $10 from Blockbuster in the year 2001. It was brand new, shrink wrapped, all that stuff. And even though I kept the cartridge, which is actually kind of surprising to me because I had a habit back then of selling games I didn't care about anymore, or I didn't play anymore, rather. Even though I kept this cartridge all of these years for the last almost 25 years, the box and manual and all the other stuff inside are long gone. I own every other Pokemon game complete in box, including spin-offs. The games that I like to display behind me, those are just the main series games from Gens 1 through 7. I own all the Gen 8 and 9 games. I own all the spin-offs complete in box on this shelf over here just out of frame, as well as quite a few other games that are still in the boxes because I don't have a way of displaying them. Every single other Pokemon game I have complete in box. Every single game ever released officially on a Nintendo system, I have complete in box except for Pokemon Trading Card Game. I finished getting all of the rest of those games right before we moved here to Nebraska. And when we did, we were only supposed to live here temporarily and then get a house, and then prices skyrocketed, so now they're not affordable. But basically that whole time, this was only ever supposed to be a temporary place. And my plan during the time was prioritize saving up money to get a house. Then when we get a house, then I'll celebrate by picking up the complete box copy of Pokemon Trading Card Game, finish my collection, proudly display my collection. Can't do that anymore. And now, not only can I not do that in a new house, this, of course, has gotten ridiculously expensive complete in box. All the Pokemon games have gotten expensive. They were expensive when I got them, and they've gotten even worse ever since. I can't imagine somebody trying to do what I did 5-10 years ago trying to do it now. That would just be insane. So now that we're going to be living here basically indefinitely, I might change my mind. I might get a complete in-box copy of Pokemon Trading Card Game just to finally complete my collection and not have to worry about it. A lot of me doesn't want to because I still don't have a good way of displaying all my Pokemon games. There's some that are just going to have to be in storage until we move because I got nowhere to put them. And I feel like it would be a little anticlimactic for me to complete my collection but not have a proper way of showing it off, or not even a proper way of seeing it for myself. So as much as I really want that game, and it is number 2 on my priority, so it is something I really, really, really want, I still think I'm going to be holding off at least for now. You know, hopefully in 5 or 10 years when we finally do move, I won't look back and say, oh, I should have gotten it then, it was so much cheaper. The prices are not cheap right now. If this is cheaper, I don't want to know what worse than this looks like. And the number 1 gaming thing that I want that I don't have yet, more EverDrives. So in 2020, 2021, I was doing a playthrough of Final Fantasy III, which is really Final Fantasy VI, on the Super Nintendo. It was my first time playing through it. I put in about 20 hours into the game. I think I was right around the halfway point. And then one day, the save file disappeared. The battery had died. This actually happened on quite a few Super Nintendo games I really cared about. Final Fantasy III, which is really 6, Donkey Kong Country, even Super Mario World. There were just a lot of games that their batteries all died within the span of a few months of each other, which makes sense because that's about when you can expect those batteries to die. 20, 25, 30 years after the game released, that's actually pretty respectable. But all of those saves just disappearing on me practically all at once just really hurt me. It really did something to my mind. It made me just, it completely killed any interest I had of picking up the games and starting all over again. And even now, even after I've replaced all those batteries, and they should hold a save until I'm in my 50s or 60s, even now, it's really hard for me to be at all motivated to pick them up and go again, just knowing that it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, and all of those saves that I've been working on are going to disappear one day no matter what I do. At the same time, I was going for a complete Nintendo 64 library, and I had been working on that since 2017, 2018. And then in the early 2020s, when I had 130 games to my name, I was really close to the halfway mark, about 40% of the entire North American library. The prices just skyrocketed across the board, and it completely killed my interest. That, combined with just getting so many, just buying so many games off of eBay, and them coming in and they were reproductions, it just really killed all my interest in trying to collect for the Nintendo 64. So in 2021, 2022, I ended up selling almost all my N64 games, except for my Pokemon games and a dozen or so games that I really, really cared about, or were copies of games that I had from my childhood. So I ended up selling over 100 of my N64 games. And I basically decided at that point, you know what, if I'm going to get an EverDrive for my Super Nintendo, I should just get an EverDrive for my N64 as well, because hey, then I'll be able to still play the games even if I don't have them. When I made that decision, I didn't own a single EverDrive of any kind. I didn't own any way to play games on my system without owning a copy of that game. Since then, I picked up ODEs and flashcards, including this Mega EverDrive Pro, for pretty much every other retro console I have. And now the Super Nintendo and the N64 are the only two consoles that I have left that I don't own an EverDrive for or a flash card. Super Nintendo EverDrives are very expensive. I'm talking like $200 to $250, and it's easier to justify buying much cheaper EverDrives and flash cards for other systems before the Super Nintendo. The N64 is a lot cheaper now. There's a flash cart that came out in the last year or two. I forget what it's called, but it's not an EverDrive from Crix. It's a lot cheaper. It can play 64DD games. I'll probably end up getting that next. Ironic that the very first EverDrive I wanted was a Super Nintendo one, and it's going to be the last one I get. I'm sure tons of people would recommend I just get a Mister or that I just emulate on my computer for free, but I like flash carts. I like playing on real systems as realistically as possible, and flash carts such as EverDrives are a good way of being able to do that without having to dish out hundreds of dollars per game to play some of the best ones. So this Mega EverDrive Pro, for example, this can play 5 systems worth of libraries on the Sega Genesis without the need of an add-on. This can play Genesis, 32X, and Sega CD games. I own a 32X, so that's why I can play it. It can also play Master System games and NES games. It can play libraries for 5 systems on a Genesis. And then there's things like the X Station, which is a video I'm going to be making soon, that can play games on a PlayStation with an SD card. That's just so cool to me that you can load up the entire library of a system onto a cartridge, onto an SD card, and play it, and still be able to experience, booting up the system, fiddling around with the video cables and the controller and all that stuff. And it just feels more authentic to me. I'm sure that I will be getting an N64 and a Super Nintendo flash cart sometime in the near future. It's almost inevitable. And it's nice to know that when I do, I'll be able to play through those games and not have to worry about the save file ever dying, at least not within my time, my life. So yeah, that's why I want EverDrive so much, is I want to be able to play the games and not have to worry about ever losing my progress ever again, but still being able to play on a real Super Nintendo, on a real N64, and yeah, that's why they're my #1 pick for the video game thing, or things, that I want most. So that'll do it for this video. Make sure to like and subscribe if you like this content. Like I said, I'll be having a video coming out soon talking about the X Station. Also got a lot of other videos talking about video game stuff in the near future, so if that sounds like something you're interested in, then be sure to follow along. And remember, I'm looking forward to reading your comments to let me know what gaming things you're missing but you want to own someday as well, just like me. That'll bring this video to an end. Thanks everyone for watching, and stay tuned for more.